Egypt is calling for international military intervention in neighbouring Libya. It made its appeal after Egyptian jets bombed what the government said were targets affiliated with ISIL. But could that be the beginning of a broader intervention? And what are the implications for both countries? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. An international coalition intervened in Libya in 2011 to help overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, and Western leaders celebrated it as a success. 4 years on, many are arguing whether Libya is a failed state. The country is controlled by competing militias with different ideologies who back two different governments. Hardly surprising then that Libya's instability is a source of concern and increasingly a threat to its neighbours. On Monday, Egypt launched airstrikes on the coastal city of Derna. It said it was in response to an ISIL-affiliated group releasing a video of the beheading of 21 Coptic Egyptians. As in Syria, ISIL, it seems, is taking advantage of Libya's security vacuum, and it has Egypt worried. President Abdel Fattah el Sisi says the events in Libya are a threat to world peace and security, and Egypt is now urging the international community to intervene against ISIL in Libya, just as they are in Syria and in Iraq. It's not difficult to see why Egypt is feeling the pressure. To the west, at least 3 Libyan groups have now pledged allegiance to ISIL. And of course, Egypt shares that long, porous border with Libya. And in the east, the ISIL-affiliated group, formerly known as Ansar-Beit al-Maqdis, is battling with security forces. It killed 32 soldiers and policemen just last month. So, as we've been saying, there are 2 competing governments in Libya, one in Tobruk and one in Tripoli, and both with very different views of Egypt's intervention in their country. Here's Khalifa Haftar, the self-appointed defence minister of the Tobruk government, in a phone interview with Libyan TV.
If there were any terrorist groups on the Egyptian side and we were able to hit them, we wouldn't hesitate to fight them. And it's the same thing that applies for Egypt. For groups that commit such crimes, borders aren't going to be an issue.
And here's what the Prime Minister of the Tripoli-based government, Omar al-Hassi, had to say.
This horrible assault and this terrorism that's been conducted by the Egyptian military represents a violation of sovereignty in Libya and is a clear breach of international law and the UN Charter.
So that's a background. Let's now get the thoughts of our guests. Here with me in the studio is Yehia Ghanem, a fellow at City University in New York and an Egyptian journalist. In London, El-Gamaty, head of Taghyeer, a political party in Libya. And in Oxford, Robert Mills, Salamanca Group's country manager in Libya. Salamanca provides risk management services. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Let's get this underway. El-Gamaty in London, if we could start with you. It is complete chaos in Libya. Egypt is threatened. President El Sisi says there is no other choice other than for a coalition to go in and sort it out. And many would say he's right.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But before I start, if you can just allow me, please, to make a very small point about today. The date is very special. Today is the 17th of February. It is 4 years to the start of the Libyan revolution. It has been very traumatic and difficult transition over the last 4 years. We Libyans are at a major, crucial juncture. We either emulate Tunisia to the west and lay the foundation of a new democratic political order, or unfortunately, we go down the Egyptian route to the east and regress to military rule and tyranny. I hope we go west and emulate Tunisia, because the Libyans have sacrificed greatly throughout the revolution to end tyranny, to end dictatorship, to end oppression, and to live free and to aspire to build a democratic and developed country. Now I come to your point. Of course, I think Egypt has its own internal problems. General Sisi has his own intrinsic dynamics which are very difficult, and maybe it is convenient for him to export some of these problems and divert attention away to Libya. By the way, we totally condemn the killing of any Egyptian. The video, if it's true, is heinous. It's absolutely horrific, and we condemn it. Whether these Egyptians are Muslims or Christians doesn't make any difference. Our fellow neighbors, brothers, Egyptians, we think of them all the same, and we would love to have a great relationship with Egypt and the Egyptian people.
Okay, let me just jump in there and just say it may be convenient for President El Sisi, but it's also pretty clear that Libya does not have the capacity to tackle ISIS. So what is the alternative when Egypt is threatened? They need to go and sort it out, don't they?
The alternative has been spelled out by Bernardino Leon, the Special Envoy of the United Nations. It has been repeatedly stated by America, by Britain, by Italy, by the EU, by the United Nations. The solution in Libya cannot be a military one. The solution is a political one. There has been too many civil wars going on in Libya for the last 9 months. Haftar has been launching air raids in Libya for the last 9 months, and it has never resolved the problem. It has never did not bring him any victory.
But
so,
political efforts haven't achieved anything so far, have they? In fact, probably made things worse.
Yeah, but yes, but they are the only option we have. We have to persevere with dialogue, with political dialogue. Pressure has to be brought about on all sides to come to the table and have a dialogue and have a national consensus and achieve a political settlement. The problems in Libya are essentially political. It's a struggle over power and over wealth, and we have to resolve it peacefully and have a consensus. Libyans have never had an experience of forging consensus, and we need to learn, and we need international help with that.
Okay, let's get the view of Robert Mills. Robert, you know the security situation in Libya very well. What's your take on the current situation right now?
I think we need to be very careful to distinguish between two things. First of all is the battle between the Dignity and Dawn forces, in effect for power within Libya. It's not an ideological battle. It's to do with who wants power. And the second one is the rise of what I would call Islamic State inspired groups who've put their roots down in Derna, and we've watched this for the last 2 or 3 years. And we've also watched them emerging in the city of Sirte. We're first of all based on Ansar al-Sharia groupings there, and then a more extremist element, certainly in the last 6 months, arising. So in terms of intervention, I think we need to be absolutely clear that any international intervention, which I personally would be wary of, needs to be focused on excising the cancer of the gangsterous psychopathic element of the IS wannabes from the strongholds they've got at the moment.
Right. When you say, Robert, when you say you're wary of...
that really is the international effort.
Okay, when you say you're wary of intervention, do you mean that it shouldn't happen, or it should happen in the sense of assistance rather than boots on the ground, the proverbial boots on the ground?
Well, boots on the ground is a funny phrase. Yeah. I think it may require some boots on the ground, but those are what I would call specialist boots on the ground, advising in specialist capabilities that have been developed over the last 10 years and have proved to be incredibly effective in Iraq and Afghanistan and other areas in rooting out terrorist activities such as we're seeing in Libya. I think if boots on the ground means deployed military units, they tend to create more problems unless there's a really robust stance taken by whoever it is that's contributing those forces.
Okay, let's bring it to the studio here now. Yehia Ghanem. Robert's right, isn't he? There's two things going on here. You have to distinguish between both of them, the battle for power within Libya and also ISIS trying to spread its influence and its grip on power in the regions that it's in already. But how do you countenance that with Egyptian interests across the border and what they want to do?
Well, let me just stress upon certain facts before we start talking about what does exactly Egypt trying to achieve. First, since the military took over on July 3rd, 2013, the military, they made it no secret that they want the international community to intervene in Libya. So it's not the point that the president of Egypt started calling for the international community intervention after the sudden emergence of the so-called ISIS in Libya.
So what are you saying, that these executions are almost a pretext for him to go in?
I don't want to use the word pretext, but maybe it's more proper to use an excuse to push the international community, which was actually kind of reluctant to intervene militarily and physically into Libya. So I believe that that despicable crime that was committed against the 21 Egyptians was used as an excuse for the Egyptians to start inciting the international community to intervene.
And why would the Egyptians want that? In your view,
there are many things that actually motivate the nowadays government in Egypt to incite the international community to intervene. First, I believe that this government wanted right from the start to intervene by itself, but of course, in terms of logistics, in terms of the capabilities, the Egyptians cannot do it by themselves.
But why do they want to intervene? What is in their interest?
I believe. Let me put it that way. I believe that as much as it's a power game, internal power game in Libya, it's the same game outside Libya. Regionally and internationally. So there are many parties that I can see involved in this Libyan game, some local, some regional, and some international, and each party is after its own interests. The United States, for instance, has its own interest over there, but the United States, for many reasons, showed it and made it no secret that she doesn't want to be involved militarily on the ground. Even after the execution, the murder of its ambassador last year, the United States made it very clear that she doesn't want to be involved militarily, at least so far. The Italians, they seem to be very enthusiastic about the idea of going back to the former colony for their own economic interests. France, it's very obvious, the case of France, it's obvious that France's mouth is watering for a piece of cake in Italy. Britain, with all due respect, Britain, of course, guarantees its interest once or as long as the British are following the United States.
But it's up for discussion at the UN Security Council tomorrow, which we'll come to in just a second. I just wanted to go back to Robert Mills before we return to Guma El-Gamaty. Robert, just expand for us a little bit more on the complexities of intervention and you know, if it ends up being a ground war, just what that's likely to do within Libya and to the region as a whole.
Nick, yes, but if I could just say a couple of things first.
Of course.
There are two things that I've heard throughout my time in Libya, and I've had a fantastic time there in a wonderful country with wonderful people. But there are two common views or statements. The first is the statement that nothing like ISIS or Al-Qaeda could ever happen in Libya because Libyans aren't like this. To which my response has always been, listen, look out, this is happening all over the world and it will happen here. And the second thing one always hears, and even recently with friends and associates from both sides of the Dawn and Dignity camps, that it's always someone else's fault. There's a conspiracy theory. It's to do with Gulf states or America or Europeans' invested interests. The trouble is, it's not. This is a Libyan problem that if it's not sorted out primarily by Libyans, with both sides, Dawn and Dignity, reconciling themselves to the truth of what's going on inside the state, these people will destroy Libya and Libyans. And let's not forget that a few weeks ago, before the tragic killing of the Egyptians last week, there were a number of Misratans who were killed, and a few weeks before that there were some members of the Libyan army. That this phenomenon will destroy Libya and Libyans, and that is what Libyans must really wake up to. In terms of the complexities of intervention, it can be done, but it can't be done in the same way as in Syria and Iraq. Libya is a very, very different country. It's a far more stable country than either of those two. This needs to be brutally focused on what needs to be done. There needs to be, I mean, internationally, I think there could be far better intelligence sharing, and I think the Egyptians could lead very effectively on that. Some international, regional, interagency intelligence sharing framework, perhaps in a major headquarters. But largely, I think the operations need to be done on the ground by Libyans. I fully accept that they do not have the capacity to do an awful lot themselves, although some of the militias on both sides of the divide are quite effective. And the international community needs to be able to reach in and destroy, where it can, the leadership, the logistics, and the communications of these ISIS groups. And there was an interesting comment that Richard Williams made in the Times this morning about timing. And he said that the timing in Iraq and Syria, he advocated patience. I don't think in Libya one can be patient. So I think the Egyptians are trying to tackle this. It needs to be tackled now. These groups have only just reared their heads, and they can probably be taken out fairly easily. Not destroyed, but neutralised.
Okay.
Of course, they will change as soon as they are attacked.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that context. Let's bring in El-Gamaty. So intervention in some shape or form is precarious, but it's perhaps, I think what Robert is saying is it's necessary sooner rather than later in a very careful, orchestrated fashion. But you don't agree with that?
Well, first of all, any military intervention in Libya need to be legal, need to have a United Nations mandate and a Security Council resolution. Otherwise, it is illegal. Secondly, this military intervention, even if it had an international legality backing, it can be either in two forms, either boots on the ground or airstrike. Now, airstrikes have never been effective, even within Libya itself. Haftar has been trying them for 9 months and they have not worked. Boots on the ground will aggravate the situation gravely. They will actually compound things. They make things worse, because as soon as there are Western or foreign troops on the ground in Libya, that will attract IS affiliates and Al-Qaeda affiliates from all over the region, and they will come into Libya, and that will make things even much worse. We've seen that happen in Iraq and other places. So although I agree that this danger of IS affiliates in Libya need to be contained, it is probably at the beginning. It is now localized in Derna, Benghazi, and possibly Sirte. The numbers are limited, I believe, and I lived in Libya for the last 3 years, and we talked to a lot of people on the ground. The numbers are probably within hundreds. It can be contained, but what can help contain that a lot is if we reach a political resolution and a political settlement in Libya quickly, if we have a national unity government, if we stop this dichotomy and this collision between Tripoli and Tobruk, and have a united Libya, and the Libyans are all pushing in one direction, then actually a united national unity Libyan government can take on those extremist IS affiliates.
Okay, let's just bring it back to the studio here.
Can take care of those hundreds easily.
Okay.
And we know exactly where they are, and they're still localized.
Thanks, Guma.
And they're still not.
Thanks, Guma. Let's bring it to Yehia Ghanem here in the studio. And we were talking a little bit earlier, we mentioned, didn't we, about those who were suggesting that President Sisi is acting solely with the intention of deflecting attention from domestic issues. Is that something that you would concur with?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I guess that President Sisi is suffering from very serious problems internally, and some of these problems I can call chronic ones. acute ones.
But you saw, we showed that map earlier, didn't we? You saw the length of that border that Egypt has with Libya. I mean, he's right to be concerned, isn't he, about the growth of ISIS?
Of course, he's got all the right to be concerned. but
so why not say that we need an international?
Let's not discard that fact that Sisi is suffering from serious problems inside, and the fact that he made it obvious even before he took over as a president that he wants to head west to Libya, and he actually started interfering, and unfortunately, in my estimation, I might be wrong, that was the worst kind of interference. I mean, because the interference was in favor of one party against the other, and it's very obvious. They made it clear that they are in favor of the dignity forces, the Haftar. General Haftar. So, and that's why the Libyans refused Egypt. And this is so unfortunate. As an Egyptian, I hate to say that, they refused Egypt as a mediator during the peace process.
But as an Egyptian, when you look at the situation here and you see ISIS in the pockets of Libya, doesn't that concern you? Does that concern you as a security situation for Egypt?
But we have to establish a fact that the Dawn forces has nothing to do with the ISIS, the so-called ISIS. So I just want to ask the question, are you going, if we are going as Egyptians to move inside Libya, hypothetically speaking, are we going to fight with the forces of dignity, or are we going really to root out ISIS? This is a question, a very serious one, that has to be answered by the authorities in Egypt. If we are going to go after ISIS, yes, I stand squarely behind them. If we are going to support one party against the other, as an Egyptian, I would say no.
Okay, Robert Mills, from your perspective and the time you spent in Libya, and I appreciate you're not there right now, but how much support would you say there may be within the country for President Sisi's position right now and what he's talking about doing?
I would say that there will be huge suspicion because they will attribute to Mr. Sisi some of the agendas we just heard from the other panelists, whether they're true or not. And personally, I don't think that is the case. Most of the population of Libya are desperate for a solution. They're desperate for strong leadership. They're desperate for political stabilization and some sort of economical progress. And I know it's true to say that IS is a very small force at the moment, and that is quite right. But the vacuum we've got out there and the growing number of dispossessed youngsters who are after a cause will be drawn to IS for want of anything better to do, no jobs. And I could remind you, although there may be only 250 people, well, two things. First of all, there were only ever about 250 people, terrorists in Northern Ireland, and that took us 30 years. And at one stage we had 30,000 troops trying to assist the police in stabilising Northern Ireland. And the second thing is, even though there are very small numbers of ISIS, there are 0 international players in Libya at the moment, and without the contribution from the international community on the commercial side, there will be no economic development, and therefore this political and security stagnation will continue or deteriorate further.
Okay, just going to jump in very quickly there because we've just got 30 seconds left or so. Guma, if I can just throw this last one to you. People are talking about Libya becoming a failed state or a Somalia on the Mediterranean. Isn't that the case, therefore, that you need Egypt to step in and help force a resolution to the issues that are facing Libya?
No, Libya is not a lost hope yet. It's not a lost cause yet. Libya is too close to Europe for comfort to be allowed to become a totally failed state. I think Sisi has no right to try to take us Libyans back to military rule and try to help install a failed retired military general in the name of Haftar as another Sisi in Libya, as a Libyan Sisi. We Libyans did this. We went through this revolution in the last 44 years so that we can be free, so that we can can have a democratic system so that we can achieve the best development we can, because we have all the ingredients and the potential for that. Sisi
okay,
wants
we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much. I'm sorry to jump in, but we have absolutely run out of time. We appreciate it. Thanks very much indeed, gentlemen. Interesting discussion. Guma El-Gamaty and Robert Mills there in the UK, and Yehia Ghanem here in Doha. Thanks very much indeed. And thank you for joining us. If you've got anything you'd like to add, or you can go to our programme page at Jazeera.com. You can also post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or send your tweets to @AJ Inside Story. I'm Nick Clark from the whole team. Bye for now.